Aston Martin is going through a big period of transition at the moment. It's moving away from its slightly fusty, old school vibes towards a more focused future where it aims to take a little bit of customer presence away from those well-known Italian brands. And while the revolution has been kicked off with the new DB12, things are going to take another step forward with this. It's the brand new Vantage. Now, the previous Vantage was a truly successful car for Aston Martin, and this latest car aims to eclipse that success of its predecessor, mainly with a revitalised interior and an even more focused driving experience, but while still ensuring that you can use this car every day. Now, we've come out to sunny Spain. We're going to be testing it both on the road and on the track to see what this latest V8 supercar can deliver. And I think the best way to start things off is to have a little look around the outside before we dive inside and see what this latest Vantage has under its skin.
The Aston Martin Vantage is an altogether angrier looking thing than the car that came before it. It's up front where the bulk of these changes remain, with a wider front track giving lead to bigger air intakes and an overall more aggressive appearance. At the rear of the car, yes, it's a little bit similar to the car which came before, but with 21-inch forged alloys all round, I'd say that this new Vantage looks even better than the old car, and that was still a very pretty looking sports vehicle.
Naturally, inside the interior of the Aston Martin Vantage, we've got loads of high quality materials used throughout. And what I like is that it's been combined with quite a usable centre console area. So key to this new generation of Aston Martins is this revitalised infotainment system, which is far easier to use than one, well, particularly on the previous Vantage, which, if you were nice about it, you would say it was lacking functionality, and if you were not being nice about it, you'd say it just wasn't very good. This new one is much better and has all of the key features that you want. It's responsive and it's easy to access, but most importantly, we've got a range of physical controls. Underneath, you've got buttons for the heated seats and for the volume and for the start and the driver modes, and then interesting things like the fans. And you've all got these lovely knurled finishes on all of the major controls, but it's not just the finish on them, it's also the fact that you've just got that functionality. You can easily access it while you're driving, and I wish more cars would have that. We've also got a large screen ahead of us for all of your key driver displays. We've also, importantly, got some really nice big shift paddles, which is something that I feel like a lot of manufacturers miss out on, particularly some German brands who fit shorter paddles, and it feels like you're missing that level of engagement that you'd otherwise have. Overall, a really nicely finished interior, and I'm just a big fan of this green overall. So then, new Aston Martin Vantage from behind the wheel. For starters, what have we got? We've got a 4-litre bi-turbo V8, so similar to the one that we've seen used in lots of different Aston Martin applications. And in this new iteration of Vantage, we're getting 656 brake horsepower, which is a heck of a lot of driving force behind this car. You might hear me refer to the Vantage quite a lot as a supercar, and honestly, I think that this kind of car blurs the lines between the traditional sports car and the supercar. Why? Because it's just so capable. 0 to 60 miles an hour comes in just 3.4 seconds, and it's all delivered with quite a lot of savagery. You can toggle through different modes. I'm in Sport Plus at the moment, which feels like the most appropriate setting for quicker driving. I've got 3 settings for my damping as well, and that's something that I have found with the Vantage, is that in its firmest suspension setting, it just feels a little bit too sharp. All those potholes and imperfections come straight through, and that takes it further away from the kind of everyday application that you kind of want this car to have. In its softer setting, it feels absolutely fine. There's still loads of communication going on between the surface of the road and me, but it's not so much that it feels like it's disrupting how quickly you're able to drive the car. We have an 8-speed automatic gearbox, and the shift paddles, as I mentioned, are nice and big, so you feel like you're getting a good level of interaction between yourself and the car. Sometimes the shifts aren't quite as crisp as I would like, and particularly on downshifts, it sometimes feels like I'm not getting the gear that I want as and when I want it. But for the most part, and actually in its standard automatic mode, it shifts really intelligently. It doesn't feel like you're ever lacking for power. And that's actually one of the best things about the Vantage, is the roll-on performance. You can be in pretty much any gear, and you know that you're going to have loads of roll-on performance. So it's ideal for overtaking. In fact, we're down in Spain, we're not too far from Seville today, and it's a car that I feel like you could quite easily fill the tank and drive all the way home. I wouldn't have a problem in doing that for a second. These seats are very comfortable. They are a bit more road focused, and they're the ones that I'd be picking if I was having a Vantage every day. And the seating position itself is nice and low, and I can get loads of adjustment between the steering wheel and the seat itself, so I don't really have any complaints about the seating position. The ride is definitely more aggressive than it was on the previous Vantage, and certainly more than other models in the Aston Martin range, both previously and current. But it does mean that I'm getting loads of communication through the car about what the road's doing and what the car underneath me is actually doing itself. Visibility-wise, it's actually pretty good. The rear screen is relatively large. I can see perfectly clearly behind me, and the wing mirrors are also really big. So on a more day-to-day kind of perception, this car still feels very easy to get along with and very easy to get up to speed with. Even if you've not driven a car like the Vantage before, I don't think it would take you very long to be comfortable with it. It's a physically wide car, and it has quite a lot of presence when you are motoring down the road, but I don't feel like I'm absolutely at the extremes of the white lines. And I do love the fact that I've got these physical controls down here. I keep banging on about this in all of these videos, and it's just the fact that I can, while I'm going along, I can adjust the temperature. There. No need to go on the screen. I can adjust the fan. There. I can adjust that. And I've got all of the major controls for the steering, for the exhausts, and for the dampers right here where I need them. I don't need to delve through a screen. I don't need to take my eyes off the road. I can just do it right away. This forward instrument cluster is pretty good. I would like the read X to be maybe a little bit larger. The speed just feels like it's not as big as I'd like it. But I've already been told that Aston Martin are working on a couple of fixes. Most notably to make the gear selection, so which gear you're in, a little bit more noticeable, because at the moment it feels quite small. What about the noise though? Well, this V8 has always been known for being quite raucous, and I'd say that that's the same case in the Vantage. I've got 3 different levels of exhaust noise, so I can switch it to its quieter setting. And it does become a little bit more muted and a touch more into the background, but it's certainly not shy and retiring. And then I can go full beans, put it onto the maximum setting in its noisiest mode. And as you can hear on the downshift, get some lovely big noises. And then it does give you lots of excellent crackles and bangs as you're going along. And it all feels quite natural. It's not like I'm getting this overly synthesized sound, and of course all the pops and bangs are largely going to be engineered, but they don't come in every single time, which makes you feel like they're being more natural. Sometimes on hot hatches like the A45 or the Golf R, every lift off of throttle is met with a pop and a bang, and it almost feels like computerized because it's so frequent. On this car at least, it's not all the time, so it makes me feel like actually this is the car doing it, it's not like it's doing something to impress me too much. I do love the steering in this car too. It's got loads of good weight to it. It doesn't feel too heavy, of course, and when you cycle through the different modes, it adjusts some of the operations of the car to make them seem sharper. But even in its most standard setting, I find that the steering in this car feels very natural, but also a little bit old school. It's obviously not as communicative as a hydraulic-based system like you'd get in a McLaren, but it's still not bad. And as I said, because there's that slight firmness to the ride, it doesn't feel like I'm being isolated from the entire driving experience. That's what cars like this are meant to do. They're meant to keep you involved and keep you entertained by what's going on, because otherwise, what's the point, really? I'd say one of the best things about the Vantage, though, is just how approachable it is. It's a really powerful, really fast car. It's not something that you would just be using to poodle around in. But I feel like even if you're quite new to driving high-performance vehicles, or you've never driven an Aston Martin before, you could still extract a good level of performance out of this car without feeling like you're on some sort of ragged edge or like you're going to get yourself into a bit of bother. On track, and we can put in a bit of clip of this car being used on track, and we went around Circuit Monte Blanco earlier and had a good old rip around. It does show you that the Vantage it'll step out if you push it a little bit too far. It will remind you that it is still a V8 car underneath you, but because there are so many different levels to the traction control, and indeed I can use the rotary knob that I used for the different driver modes to cycle through different variations of the driver assistance system. So I can switch the traction control off, but still dial in between loads of assistance and completely off, and variations in between. So I can have a little bit of slip when you want it, or no slip and just keep things nice and tidy with maximum amount of reassurance from the safety net of the ESP, the Electronic Stability Program. Naturally, as a two-seater, the Vantage isn't quite as practical as the 911, and I think if you're going to have kids in the back, then the Porsche is obviously going to be the choice, because there's definitely no space for any children back there. But I think if there are just two of you travelling around in comfort, then this is the way to do it. I wouldn't have any real debate over whether or not this would be at least more exciting and more involving than the Porsche. I'd say that the comparison to this car will be for the 911 Turbo, and this car feels a lot more involving. And whereas the Turbo might edge this vehicle slightly in terms of outright performance, I think that the engagement that you're getting from the Vantage makes this into a far more appealing choice than the Porsche. I feel like this latest generation Vantage represents a big step forward, not only for the model itself, but also for Aston Martin. It's no less usable than the car it replaces, but it's more focused, it's more dynamic, and I think it looks even more exciting. However, the big changes have come inside, where the combination of physical buttons and fresh new displays make this car far better inside and easier to live with than the one that came before it. And after all, this is a car that you're still going to want to use every day. The material quality is excellent, and the fit and finish all round is just what you'd expect from Aston Martin. In fact, it just gives a bit of a reflection of the future of this brand. It's almost like they're putting real focus into how these cars are executed, and that follows through into the car that you get to actually drive at the end of the day. I would be seriously reconsidering that purchase of a 911 once you get behind the wheel of the Vantage, that's for sure. Thank you for watching this Motors new car review of the Aston Martin Vantage. Now, let us know in the comment section what you think of this new car. Would you still be thinking about a 911, or would you be going for this Aston Martin instead? Leave us a like if you have enjoyed this video, and if you subscribe and hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification each time we upload a new video.